Why do some countries never seem to develop, no matter how much time passes? Why do some nations remain poor, underdeveloped, and dependent? Countries like Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Madagascar, while others move ahead. Malaysia, Singapore, China, the United States, the list goes on. The answers aren't as simple as bad leadership or lack of resources. Today, let's break it all down and really understand why some countries just can't seem to escape underdevelopment. Let's start with history. Colonialism plays a huge role. I'm not exaggerating. During the 19th and 20th centuries, European powers carved up Africa, Asia, and Latin America for resources. But they didn't build lasting infrastructure or institutions. Railroads were laid not to connect people but to extract raw materials. Education systems were minimal and economies were built for export, not self-reliance. After independence, many of these countries were left with weak institutions, artificial borders, and no real plan for internal growth. And, as we all know, that's a shaky foundation to build a country on. But let's be realistic here. History alone isn't enough to explain everything. I want you to look at South Korea and Ghana. In the 1960s, both were very poor. Today, South Korea is a tech and economic powerhouse, while Ghana is still trying to catch up. So what made the difference? One answer is obviously governance. Good governance means stable institutions, strong rule of law, and low corruption. Countries that developed faster often had leaders who focused on education, healthcare, and long-term planning. Countries that usually stagnate suffer from unstable governments, frequent coups, and policies that benefit a few, while ignoring the rest. Now let's talk about corruption. Corruption drains national wealth, discourages investment, and slows down development. When funds meant for schools, hospitals, and infrastructure get stolen, the country stays stuck. It's a cycle. Poor governance leads to corruption, which then leads to poor development, which then leads to more instability. Then there is conflict. War destroys everything: economies, infrastructure, and social trust. Countries like Syria, South Sudan, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo have massive resources, but decades of violence and unrest keep them underdeveloped. Peace is a foundation for development. Without it, progress is nearly impossible. Now let's examine geography. It may sound unfair, but location matters. Landlocked countries like Zimbabwe often have fewer trade opportunities. Harsh climates make agriculture tough. Natural disasters can wipe out infrastructure. And while having natural resources sounds like a blessing, it can actually be a curse. This is called the resource curse. Countries rich in oil, gold, or diamonds often see more corruption, inequality, and even conflict than those without. Now let's talk about education. Education isn't just about reading and writing. It's about building human capital. Countries that invest in education see faster growth, more innovation, and better public health. Those that neglect education tend to fall behind, no matter how rich they are in minerals or oil. Without an educated population, there is no skilled workforce to drive industry or attract investment. Another huge factor is dependence. Many underdeveloped countries like Zimbabwe rely heavily on foreign aid, loans, and imported goods. Instead of building local industries, they import food, clothes, electronics, and even labor. This weakens local economies and increases debt. In some cases, countries are trapped in loan cycles, borrowing more just to pay off old debt. Trade imbalances are also part of the puzzle. When a country only exports raw materials and imports finished goods, it stays at the bottom of the value chain. Manufacturing and technology are where the real money is. Countries that don't develop local industries remain at the mercy of global prices and foreign demand. Let's look at population growth. Rapid population increases can overwhelm infrastructure, education systems, and healthcare. Without enough jobs and services, poverty grows. On the flip side, aging populations in developed nations pose different problems. But in fast-growing countries, youth unemployment can be a ticking time bomb. Now let's look at global politics. Developed nations like the United States and China often set the rules in international trade, finance, and diplomacy. Underdeveloped nations like Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Burundi have less influence and face barriers in entering markets. Trade agreements, patent laws, and even environmental regulations can work against poorer nations trying to grow their economies. Technology is another key issue. The digital divide keeps underdeveloped nations behind. Without internet access, digital literacy, and innovation, countries don't compete globally. Technology isn't just about your iPhone or your Samsung device and computers. It powers agriculture, healthcare, banking, and education. Let's not forget inequality. Some countries have extreme wealth gaps. When a small elite controls most of the country's wealth and resources, the majority stays or remains poor. This creates tension, crime, and social unrest, none of which support development. Inclusive growth is not just a moral issue, it's an economic one.